Hello world! Welcome to Nick's Talks Code, or more specifically, let's hit it.
Let's talk about Git, baby, and version control, you'll see, cause I'll explain it all in these videos, and you'll actually understand it. Let's talk about Git and version control, and get up to,
Just a super quick disclaimer, just because I don't want to get sued. The jingle that you just heard, even though the lyrics or the rewrite of the lyrics was actually written by me, it was inspired by an existing song. So I take no credit for the creation of that song. All of the credit goes obviously to the writers, creators, and the artists of the original song. If you don't know what song that is, check the description below and you will be able to find the song that inspired my little jingle down there. Just in case it wasn't obvious from all that, in this video I'll be talking about version control. What is it? Why does it matter? Does it even matter in the first place? The answer is yes. I just saved you all that time. Just kidding. And also, what is Git? What is GitHub? And how do they even relate to version control? So, without further ado, let's get it started in here. Get it? Let's take a super common everyday example and say that you're working on a basic text file on your computer, laptop, tablet. You get the point. It might be an essay, maybe even just a shopping list, maybe it's a love letter, who knows. Whatever it is, you started working on it 2 days ago. Then yesterday you decided you weren't really sure about that second paragraph, so you scrapped it and just decided to rewrite the whole thing. Which brings us to today, where you're thinking, what in the world was I even doing there yesterday? And so you just kind of want it back to the way you wrote it 2 days ago, because it makes much more sense. Except then you realize that you saved your file yesterday, and so you effectively basically just overwrote that original file, and so that paragraph went poof along with it. And if you're currently thinking that part where I saved my file doesn't sound like me at all, save your file. Like, start saving, oversave, double save, triple save. Seriously, save. Moving on. Now technically you could go and create an individual file for each of your major saves and give each of those files its own separate file name, but that's a bad practice for so many reasons. I can't go into all of them because one, there's just not enough time, and also it's not the point of this video. But there are two main ones that are relevant for this video right now. One, unless you give each individual file a super long and very descriptive name, there's not going to be any way to really tell like what's in each file. Like in this example, it's very easy because the first one just has, the initial paragraphs, and then the second one just has a little bit of a changed paragraph. But in a lot of cases, it's not going to be as clear-cut as that. And let's be honest, V1, V2, V3, it's not going to tell you what's in those files. And then even if you do manage to remember what's in the file, like if you manage to remember, oh yes, I changed that paragraph, it still doesn't really tell you exactly what was changed in those files. Because, unlike my neat little red and green additions to my amazingly drawn text file there, in our scenario in real life, it's not going to tell you those things. So you're going to have to open up each of those files and compare them to get that kind of information. And if you want to, start copy pasting, it's a mess. Which brings us to version control. Version control systems can, if used correctly, and I cannot stress this enough, if used correctly, they can, amongst other things, one, keep track of changes made to files. Not unlike my little drawing, which is what it was based on. Unlike our earlier approach, however, of saving each version as its own separate file, a version control system will save metadata about the changes made between each of the individual versions, such as what changes were made, when the changes were made, and who the changes were made by. Because version control systems can't just be used by individuals, they can be used by teams as well. Which brings us to point 2. If there is ever a scenario in which multiple people are working on the same file or files at the same time, and so multiple saves are made, in some cases, or actually in a lot of cases, that leads to certain conflicts. And version control systems can help you resolve those conflicts, which is also known as merging. And point 3, a version control system can also help you restore your file back to an earlier version of your file, which ties back into our earlier example. Now you might be wondering, so how do I use this correctly? And also, when are you finally going to talk about Git and GitHub? And the answer is in just about a minute, at least for the latter. As for the former, well, it kind of depends on the system you're using. Because just like most technology out there, there's a bunch of different types and choices out there. So how you use it correctly exactly kind of depends on which system you're using. That being said though, generally speaking, assuming that you've picked out which one you're using and you've installed it, because that's kind of essential, there is a general flow that will be followed when you're using a version control system. 1, you basically tell whatever system you end up going with, hey, I've got this folder right here and I'll be making a bunch of changes to it, so I'd like to keep track of what's going on in there. So could you please go ahead and do your thing in there? Your system will then essentially create a subfolder which it will use to store all the files that will hold all the metadata that it collects as you start working or you keep working on all of the files and the content in the folder. This is known as initializing a repository. Now this repository or this folder which holds all these files with the metadata might be a local repository, which means it can be found on your computer or laptop or whatever device you're using, or it might be a remote repository, which basically means you can find it online or in the cloud. So in case of a regular text file, you would use OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, or something similar to that. In this case, however, this is where Git and GitHub come in. So Git is one choice in the assortment of choices of a version control system, which helps you manage those files, not just locally, which is how you would usually go about it when you first start working on it, but it also helps you push those changes to your remote repository once you're ready to put your files and your code out there in the world. GitHub, however, is an example of a platform that allows you to host a remote repository. Once you've basically specified the location to your system, you have to specify what files exactly you want to keep track of. It doesn't automatically start keeping track of all of them. Instead, you have to specifically say, all right, these files are the ones that I want you to keep track of right now. Because especially if you're working with a lot of different files and subfolders, you might not want to keep track of all of them at the same time, because you might not be working on all of them. You might just be working on 1 or 2 or 3 of them. This is also known as staging or staging files. And then 3, once you've basically told your version control system, all right, this is the location and these are the exact files I want you to track, once you're kind of ready to make that snapshot of your file or files or even folders, you're basically going to give it a little message, or that's what you should do. That is the good practice. And that message will basically specify or work as a little flag identifying what exactly the differences are between the files. It should be a short and precise yet descriptive message. Pro tip. If you've ever heard someone talk about committing files or committing changes, then that's what they were referring to. Now, I have to mention that you don't have to commit files with a message attached, but you really should. If you don't, then it kind of defeats part, or actually a big part of the purpose that we were talking about earlier, which is to really understand what's what it as fast as possible, which also kind of leads me into my next part, which is sort of like a bonus part, because it's not like it necessarily comes next in the process. But if you ever get super duper lost and you don't know what's what anymore, like you have no idea what's going on, then there's 2 very specific things that you can do, which is you can check the status of the files, which basically gives you an overview of what files are being tracked right now, what files aren't being tracked, and data like that. Or you can check the log, which basically shows you an overview of all of the different commits that you've made and all of the messages that you hopefully attached to all of the commits. So those are 2 like extra bonus explanations, lingo, that I wanted to quickly attach here. So I know that was a good amount, but I really hope that it helped you get a better understanding of what version control is, how it works exactly, what Git is, what GitHub are, how they fit into the bigger picture. And I know that in this video I didn't go super deep into how exactly to do it. I went sort of like high level with it, but I am planning on making more videos in the version control series, So if you're watching this somewhere around the time that this video is uploaded, they are on the way. If not, then they should hopefully already be up. In any case, check the description below and you'll be able to see what's going on and find the links if the videos are available. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, that you learned something from it. If you did, give it some loving by giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to keep up to post, or up to date rather, with what's going on with my new videos coming up. And if you've stuck it all the way out to the end of this video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as an extra last added bonus and a very huge thank you, there are a couple of short behind the scenes and bloopers coming up. So goodbye world, or better yet, hope to see you next time on Nix Talks Code, and enjoy. Peter Pan, Pepper Potts, Peter Pan, Pepper Potts. Did you catch the irony with my drawings there, or was I being a little bit too subtle with that? Let me know in the comments below. I'm gonna get this right. Oh. Ah. Good thing this isn't live.